At the A.P. Giannini Foundation, they help fellows put their focus on science and stimulate basic research in California.
When I got the Giannini Fellowship, I was just finishing up my clinical training in neurology, and I was making the transition between my clinical training and being a scientist back in the lab. Clinician scientists like me often have to balance the clinical activities that we do with the scientific activities that we do, and the Giannini Foundation grant basically allows me to focus on the science rather than being drawn away to the more lucrative activity of seeing patients and not doing so much in the lab. And at this phase in my career, it's really critical to be spending a fair amount of time in the lab, getting my experiments going, trying to develop a scientific base. In our laboratory, we're trying to understand the brain circuitry that allows us to coordinate movement. The particular portion of the brain that we study is a series of areas called the basal ganglia. The reason why all of us are very interested in this part of the brain is because there are many diseases that affect patients in which this part of the brain is not working properly. One example of that is Parkinson's disease. Their movements become more slow, they develop a tremor, they often have difficulty with walking, and although we don't know all the details yet, the greatest suspicion is that this disease is dependent on abnormal activity in this particular part of the brain. For me, it's always been more appealing to study the diseases that don't have great treatments, because there I could potentially have a big impact. Clearly there must be some other angle that we can take to try to treat this disease. So one of the things that I think is really special about how the Giannini Foundation decides to award their fellowships is that they have two phases of the process. The first phase, you compose a research proposal with the work of a mentor that you're working with. And you propose the kinds of experiments that you want to do, how you're going to do them, why you want to do them, and you submit materials like your CV and reference letters and that sort of thing. And the Giannini Foundation filters that initial set of applications, and then they interview a subset of people. And to me, I thought that was a fantastic opportunity. I got to stand in front of 20 people, some of whom were scientists, some of whom were physicians, some of whom were not scientists, and talk about what I wanted to work on. What a great opportunity to talk to non-scientists especially about what you're working on and make the case for why studying this is really important. So my hope is that the training that I'm doing now, both in the laboratory and my clinical training, will allow me 5 or 10 years from now to be running my own research group where I'm trying to take some of the basic science that we're learning in the lab and apply it to patients who have Parkinson's disease and other neurological conditions related to it, and hopefully reduce the symptoms and/or slow down the progression of these kinds of diseases that affect the brain and the movement control systems. I think it's wonderful that the Giannini Foundation is trying to stimulate science and medicine in the state of California, funding grants. And so it was really important to me, being in California, that that was available to me.
And to learn more about how the A.P. Giannini Foundation is stimulating science and medicine, please visit apgianninifoundation.org.